Hi, Billy Goodnick, host of Garden Wise, Santa Barbara's favorite place to learn about sustainable landscaping. We're starting off with segment 2 in a series where we introduce you to landscape designers and demystify what it is that they do. We'll start with Natasha Elliott of Sweet Smiling Landscapes. She's going to show us this compact, hard-working design that she did. Hope you enjoy. Hi, welcome to our segment on working with landscape designers. I think it's really important to understand and demystify what landscape designers do and why they might be a valuable addition to your sustainable landscape project. I'm here today with Natasha Elliott. She's got a wonderfully named company, Sweet Smiling Landscapes, and we're in this beautiful renovation of a typical backyard landscape to talk about how she works, how people find her, and give you some design insights. So once you know this is a good fit, that it's a project that you can work on, what happens at the first meeting? How do things get started, and what do the clients bring to the table?
You know, first generally starts first with a conversation over the phone. Then we come out and we start to talk about the needs of the landscape. In this case, it was a pool. And so we talked about, you know, getting the pool out and then what? And she told me that she liked to entertain. And so I wanted to make sure to provide space for her to hang out. She's into dogs. She wanted a dog-friendly space, a kid-friendly space. She was taking the pool out because she was concerned about water. You know, filling a pool takes a lot of water, so we wanted to make sure it was a drought-tolerant landscape.
So I find that one of the things that designers are able to do is to take very general statements from a client and figure out what you're actually going to put into the garden. What do you do when somebody gives you a question, when somebody says to you, I like a lot of color? How do you deal with something like that so you can actually get down to a color scheme, a certain type of style?
Well, when they say I like a lot of color, I have to really define what they mean by a lot of color. You know, there's color in flowers, there's color in plant foliage, there's color in pottery, there's color in furnishings. So really understanding what they're trying to say with coloring. Maybe you can make a beautiful garden with all gray foliage and then you put some pops of color in the furniture. Maybe that's not their style. So yeah, understanding what they mean by a lot of color. And where do you want to use the color?
And you do that by asking more questions and showing them examples. Yeah.
Yeah, generally the first 10 to 15 minutes of a consultation, I just try to ask questions to really understand that person, get a sense of their personality, their style. Sometimes I like to come into their house, ask them what their favorite pieces of furniture are in their house, that kind of thing.
So you've quoted a price, you got a contract from somebody, now it's time to actually start. So what is your process to get something on paper so you can share that with your client?
Yeah, so first I start with, you know, explaining the look that they're going for, the style that we're going for. Then, you know, what elements do you need? Do you want a patio? Do you need walkways? Do you need to get from the driveway to the front door better?
So you've got a contract, there's some money exchange, you got some signatures. You mentioned you come out and you measure the property, etc. So when you get back to the office and you start working on the project, what's the first deliverable look like?
Yeah, so the first process is to come out and measure. And when I come out and measure, I usually give myself extra time than just actually taking the measurements, because I like to sit there and just really get a sense of how it feels to be in that space. I listen to the noises, get a real sensory sense of the space, you know, see the sight lines. Sometimes that doesn't all stick in the first meeting. And then I come back to the office and I take my chicken scratch notes and put them into a base plan in AutoCAD so that I can start playing around with the layout.
This is the first thing that the client sees back from you.
So I get the base plan down, and then I know that they wanted an area for sit-down dining for large places. They wanted some sort of lawn area, they wanted a fire pit, and they wanted to grow vegetables. So those were the elements I knew I needed to play around. Once I put them in, I thought, well, you really need a water feature, and a fence would be nice here because it's nice to grow berries along them. And so as I thought about their needs, kind of creative solutions came up. I draw them out, and then this one I'm really trying to bring the garden to life. So I add color, and then I also come in and take inspirational images that kind of flesh out what this plan view image is. So that's what this is. You know, this is the kind of fencing that I'm thinking for here. This is the bench area. For a lot of people, it's hard to envision the space from a plan view. That's what I'm good at, not everybody else. So I try my best to make it as digestible and understandable so that we make sure that everybody's on the same page and everybody's happy.
Great. Well, I think it's a beautiful, contemporary, really crisp looking garden. Could you explain what the different spaces are and what they do?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, this was originally a swimming pool. So once they took out the swimming pool, we were left with pretty much a blank slate, which gave a lot of opportunity. And it's a decent sized yard, it's not huge. And so I really just envisioned like one giant living room. And, you know, living room needs to feel cozy. And so wanted to put the trees there to provide shade. And my idea was almost that it gives you a big hug.
So one thing I really like that you did here in your practice, and I guess you do it as clients are willing, is you not only dealt with the macro here, how the spaces are used and the construction material, but you also had a hand in accessorizing. So talk a little about that and also follow up. What happens after the job is done?
Yeah, so start with thinking about hardscape layout and where the planter beds are going to go, and then as you go it gets refined, and eventually you end up wanting to accessorize, and I love having a hand in that. I think coming in and doing pots are always a good idea. Almost every landscape needs a few nice pieces of pottery, and so coming in and selecting the right pottery and the plants to go in them is adds just an extra touch and is a really fun opportunity to play with color and texture.
Well, the thing that I like here is in the rest of the garden you used kind of a broad brush approach to planting, but the nice thing here is you get to sit here and see the complexity of these things. You get to see them up close. So, and once the garden's installed, is that it? You wave goodbye and cash the check, or what's the rest of the life of the project?
No, I mean, when you're creating a landscape, you're creating a living, breathing, ecological system, and sometimes that needs a little maintenance to make sure it's on the right track. So I always like to come back, check in, help provide maintenance guidance, and then, you know, because they're plants and they grow, light changes, things get too big, you know, over the course of a garden, every 5 to 10 years, it's a good idea to come in and do a little bit of a revamp.
Yeah, well, one saying I heard is that a garden is a process, not a product. So it's never done, and like you say, shade happens.
Yeah, or sometimes I like to think of it as designing in 4 dimensions, and the 4th dimension is time.
Exactly.
That's a huge element, both with like staggering flowering times, you know, if something's deciduous, and then also just thinking about the longevity of the process. And I always try to design for longevity, but you know, some plants have longer lifespans than the others, some don't, so there's always changes that need to happen.
This has been great. I love the garden, love your plant choices, love hearing about your process. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
As Natasha told us, a garden is a process, not a product. It's always evolving. So now we're going to travel to the foothills to the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden. That was quick. We're going to learn about microclimates and how an understanding of microclimates will help you choose the right plant for the right place.
Santa Barbara is home to a variety of native plants that are adapted to our semi-arid Mediterranean climate. The Santa Barbara Botanic Garden grows and conserves these vital parts of the ecosystem. Since its creation in 1926, it has worked to study and conserve California's habitats through gardening and horticultural research of native plants. The garden's 78 acres showcase California's plant diversity and demonstrate the concept of microclimates.
There's kind of the bigger climate that we all live here in Santa Barbara, where we have our warm, dry summers, pretty mild winters, but when you start looking at a site on a smaller scale, you'll start to notice that there's a warm side of a building or a cooler side of a building, looking at light. So when you're looking at a microclimate, you really want to think about what does a plant need. Plants need light and plants need water. So how are those things impacted on the site you're looking at?
Growing plants at home depends on microclimates in individual yards. Microclimates are small areas affected by variations in confined natural spaces of an ecosystem within a larger climate. The conditions vary around houses depending on soil, biotic, and abiotic features, irrigation levels, mulch, trees, sunlight exposure, and patios also all impact microclimates.
It's pretty easy for a homeowner to start assessing their microclimate and figuring out what they have going on in their yard. You just want to go out multiple times through a day, go out multiple times through a week, through a month, and just pay attention.
We really love native plants because they are actually adapted to live in this very microclimate, making them a very natural and easy to grow choice for any homeowner. We have those plants available at the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden all year round, along with the knowledge and how to care for those plants and how to make the selection for whatever microclimate should occur at your own home.
The Botanic Garden provides resources for educating and promoting individual conservation efforts in our own backyards. Anyone can visit the garden and learn about growing native plants. The Waterwise Home Garden is a great place to get inspiration.
So we're here in our Waterwise home demonstration garden because we wanted to really showcase that gardening with native plants is easy and that native plants can do all kinds of things. So here at the home demonstration garden we have a lot of different little microclimates that can showcase how these plants can be used for shade, they can be used in hot, dry locations, and it's a great place to learn about how to grow for plants and how to care for plants.
The Botanic Garden can aid with gardening by visiting in person, or they also have numerous online resources. California native plants are drought resistant and easy to care for while also contributing to habitat conservation. The purpose of the garden's conservation mission is to benefit the health and well-being of the planet. Learning how to use native plants in your landscape aids in the preservation of California's ecological resources.
With native plants, fall is really the best planting time, so we recommend starting to plant anytime between the end of September and then into the winter time to make use of the natural rainfall that will occur and to follow the natural rhythm of these plants that are adapted for the specific ecosystem and microclimate.
For more information, visit the Botanic Garden website at sbbg.org for tips on planting California natives, along with virtual tours and classes.
So come visit the Botanic Garden either in person or check them out online at sbbg.org. They offer classes, educational material, and some beautiful pictures. Trees, wonderful things, but it's important to care for them properly. It's more than just hiring somebody with a chainsaw and a truck. So let's talk to a certified arborist and learn more about the proper care of trees.
Trees help keep our air clean, release oxygen, and cool the environment. In many ways, trees take care of us. But who is helping to take care of the trees?
An arborist is a tree specialist, somebody hopefully who is educated, trained, and has experience in the care of trees, understanding the anatomy and physiology, how they grow, understanding identification, how trees interact in the soil, what kind of water needs they have.
In the Dr. Seuss movie, The Lorax, it is said, "I speak for the trees have no tongues." In a way, arborists speak for their needs, helping to keep these vital community resources healthy.
We often take trees for granted, and there's basic parts of a tree. We have leaves, we have roots, and we have stems. You need to understand basics. And leaves collect the carbon dioxide and produce the oxygen. And in that process called photosynthesis, they produce food for themselves to grow. So maintaining a healthy canopy of leaves is critical for the tree to maintain adequate fuel to function. And while it's doing that, it's also providing the benefits of shade and cooling the atmosphere and cleaning the air. The roots absorb water and minerals, and also they provide a benefit where they reduce erosion. And if you need to understand that trees need roots to absorb the water And if you cut a lot of roots or don't have a healthy root system, you're likely to have a decline in the tree. And then of course the stems are all the woody parts that are between the roots and the leaves, and they contain the transport system for food and water, water moving up from the roots and food moving down from the leaves back down to the roots.
Living in Santa Barbara, it's pretty difficult not to notice our diverse urban forest, from native oaks and sycamores to various species of palm trees and so much more. There are actually over 450 different species of trees here in our city. Not only are the different varieties of trees beautiful, but they also serve a special preventative purpose that benefits us all.
If you just had one species of tree or a couple of species of trees, if there's a pest or a disease infestation, you can wipe out an entire community, you can wipe out your entire urban forest. Having diversity provides a lot of different species that if one species becomes infected or infested with pests and declines, you have many other trees to sustain the urban forest, and that's critical. We call that diversity versus monoculture.
Another part of the urban forest is made up of street trees and park trees. Our streets, such as State Street as an example, are lined with many beautiful trees that add to the ambiance of our community, but need care and upkeep as well.
We have over 25,000 street trees in the city of Santa Barbara and probably another 10,000 in parks. But the city really does a great job in working to manage the urban forest, the public trees.
They say location is everything, and that applies to trees as well. Choosing the right location for a tree when it's planted is vital to its long-term health and viability.
It's important to know, is it evergreen or deciduous? Does it lose its leaves in the winter, or does it maintain its leaves year-round? What size does it get ultimately? You need to know, does it drop a lot of debris in a place where maybe that is not welcome? Are the roots invasive? So understanding the tree's inherent characteristics is critical, and knowing how it will survive in our climate is critical.
We live in a place that goes through severe drought cycles. In fact, our most recent 7-year drought is considered the drought of record for our area. It is our responsibility to take that into consideration in relation to how we take care of our trees. It is crucial to maintain trees throughout periods of low rainfall. By tending to their needs, we can help combat the negative effects of prolonged droughts.
We've been through 2 major droughts in the last 20 years, and droughts really took a toll on trees. One of the issues is, some of the problem that we have with drought is that when trees don't absorb enough water, they don't adequately photosynthesize, and as a result, they don't produce enough food to sustain them or have enough fuel to protect them from infestation of pests and infection of disease. Irrigation is probably one of the most misunderstood concepts in any plant maintenance. And if people would understand a little more about the soil, a little more about the roots, a little bit more about how much water they're putting out, how water moves through the soil, they could really deal with it by putting out the water in the appropriate place at the appropriate time and the appropriate amount, and be able to save as well as keep their trees in decent shape. I think too often people are scared to use water, and they want to save $50 a month or whatever it may be to conserve water. And what happens is they may sacrifice a tree that's worth $10,000, $20,000 for a small amount of conservation. And although I believe in conservation, I do think that you have to figure out a way to give the tree what it needs, because it really adds value to our landscape and our community and to our planet.
It is up to us to care for our trees, for they are crucial to the world in which we live and are one of the major reasons that makes Santa Barbara known all over the world for its beauty. By understanding the needs of trees to maintain them, we will not only help the trees, but help ourselves. For it is the true nature of things, if we rightly consider, every green tree is far more glorious than if it were made of gold and silver.
I just want to take this moment to recognize a great arborist who recently passed away. Peter Wynn owned a company called West Tree. Unfortunately, we lost a great man. I've known him for probably over 40 years, and it's really sad that he's gone. But this segment here that I'm doing with you today is dedicated to him.
That was some great information from Bill Spiewak, and be sure to visit his website, santabarbaraarborist.com. When I think about ornamental grasses and using them in my designs, I get a little bit weak in the knees. There's just something about them. So when we were planning this episode, we said, let's do a top 10 list. So we went to Seaside Gardens, looked at all the grasses, and as you'll soon find out, I don't really count very well. I was hiding behind the grasses. Speaking of grasses, for years we've been telling you to murder your lawn, kill your grass, put something else in, go low water. Well, there are exceptions, and those are ornamental grasses like this beautiful miscanthus I'm standing next to. Grasses add so much life to the garden. They've got this vertical accent that a lot of other plants we use don't have. They have a variety of foliage colors, from variegated forms to dark reds. And the other thing that's wonderful is they're animated. The slightest breeze starts them moving in the garden. They bring life to the garden. And they also attract pollinators and beneficial insects and lots of stuff that we want in our garden. So let's have a little tour. We'll try to create a top 10 list and see if there's anything you want to put in your own garden. The reason I love coming to Seaside Gardens here in Carpinteria is that there's just such a beautiful range of plants, and we've got a great combination here. So how do we actually go about using these ornamental grasses and grass-like plants in the garden? Great combination. We have red fountain grass here. This is a form of Pennisetum, and this is not a grass. This is a local California rush called Juncus. And what's going on right here is we've got tremendous amount of contrast, even though they're both grassy types of plants. Obviously, the dark foliage color, the form of the flowers on this gives us a nice kind of somber background. And the fine textured leaves of the Juncus, a little bit gray, a little bit green, create a beautiful contrast. So even if there weren't flowers, it's important to create contrast in the garden year round. Flowers are fleeting, and they're not always putting on a big show. So having something stable like this in the garden is a real boon. Not all grasses are towering, and not all grasses are mowed like lawns, but this makes a great ground cover. This is Blue Fescue, a form of Festuca. This one's called Elijah Blue. And what I love about it is the color is such a wonderful contrast, but it can also be planted in masses. Yes, we're talking masses of grasses, and cover large areas of this. So if you've got some darker green plants or plants with other foliage colors, this makes a great backdrop for it to play off of. So consider Festuca as one of your ground covers. Very low water use, needs no maintenance, and it even grows some beautiful little flowers over time. Okay, on the top 10 list, so all you got's a veggie garden. Good for you, nice to be growing your food, or you have a big pot with just some herbs. Want to get vertical? Was that Olivia Newton-John? Yeah, want to get vertical. How about chives, leeks, anything in the onion family? Also lemongrass if you like doing some Southeast Asian cuisine. Don't have any here to show you, but it's a beautiful grass. So grow it, eat it, and then brush your teeth or use a mouthwash. On my top 10 list for all native gardens, if that's the trick you're after, this is Laymus Canyon Prince. It's a type of ryegrass, has this beautiful gray-blue sort of color, and it spreads slowly by runners. It's not particularly invasive, but keep the watering on the low side, give it deep occasional waterings, and you'll be rewarded for years. If it starts looking shaggy, cut it all the way to the ground. It'll just smile and come right back. In the last few years, plant propagators have discovered Lomandra and given us a tremendous variety of different forms of this. And this is one of my favorites. This is called Lomandra breeze. And it's characterized by this sort of lemony yellow green color, which is fabulous in a shady area like this. When we're in shade and we have dark colored foliage, they really don't stand out, but the lighter the foliage, the more presence they have. So consider Lomandra. In full sun, this plant will stay a bit lower, but it is one of my favorites, so I'm adding this to the top 10 list. Not a grass, but definitely grass-like. This is one of dozens of New Zealand flax. This dark purple one is going to get quite a bit bigger, but it gives us a nice tropical effect. I've used them in Mediterranean-style gardens. It's just a real standout because of its dark foliage. Extra special treat, combine it with something that's a bright yellow-green and you get fabulous contrast. This grass is indispensable in any garden. If you're running out of the house and you forgot to put on makeup and you realize your eyebrows don't look very good, this is perfect. Looks like you got a caterpillar on each eye. This is a California native. It's called Bouteloua and it's got the cutest name. It's called Blonde Ambition. It's not real showy as the grass itself. The foliage just kind of fills in the garden, but when these flowers come in summer and they persist for months, it's just a wonderful little bit of animation in the garden. And when you get a little bit of breeze, like that, they put on a wonderful show. More grassy plants, great for narrow beds when you want to have a little bit of flair in a small space. I've got this in my garden right now, grows about knee-high, maybe a tiny bit higher than that, has some beautiful little blue flowers on it, and sometimes you're rewarded with these shiny little blueberries. But this is Dianella Casa Blue, spelled with 2 S's, Casa Blue, and this is another Dianella, a variegated form, which I really like to use underneath partially shaded areas, just because it's animated, the variegation wakes up the spot. Add it to your top 10 list. There are beautiful, wonderful fountain grasses you should invite into your garden, and there's a few that you should not. Just to beware, driving down Foothill, Cathedral Oaks, and a lot of other neighborhoods, you'll see a green-leafed relative of this with a similar flower, not as purple, and going up San Marcos Pass, and they have become a weed and a pest. So please, if that's showing up in your garden, get rid of it, cut the flowers off, and be prepared for a few years of battling it because it'll continue to reseed. But it's a menace. On a happier note, we have Pennisetum Eaton Canyon. Wonderful, fine, delicate look. It stays pretty small, gets about 2 feet, maybe 3 feet high. Flowers in the summertime. One caution with this and many of the other fountain grasses is you want to cut them all the way to the ground when they start looking really shabby. The reason for that is this foliage will go brown, and next year the new foliage is going to try to come up through it, so you're going to have a mix of dead leaves and beautiful purple leaves. So do yourself a favor, slash it to the ground. It's kind of fun to do. It'll open up and create space in your garden. That's really a good thing, is to have a little bit of seasonal change. So this particular fountain grass and many of the other grasses we've talked about today, some of the miscanthus, are all grasses that benefit from cutting down. If you're not sure, look them up, but don't be timid. Just so we don't end up thinking that grasses are only for meadow-type gardens or Mediterranean gardens, I'm in the middle of the succulent garden at Seaside, and we're looking at this beautiful, it's called a Mexican grass tree. This is Dacilerion. So if you like the idea of having grassy, grass-like plants in your garden, this is the one for you. They gradually get a nice long trunk, but for quite a few years they'll just stay low with this beautiful little explosion. It's like fireworks in the garden. Very, very popular plant from South Africa. Again, not a grass, this is Cape Rush. This is the smallest version of it. This is called Chondropetalum El Campo. There are others. There's one called Elephantium, I think it is, that gets about as tall as me. So be sure if you like this plant and you want to have it in your garden, make sure you really understand its mature size. Every plant grows up to a certain size and we really can't stop that. This is not a plant that wants to be pruned, so pick your battles, as we say, but it's a beautiful plant. What I love about it most is it's got these little brown bands along the joints of the plant, which just add this wonderful warmth to it. Shady areas, Asian-style gardens, some morning sun, no afternoon heat, and you'll be able to keep these a little on the dry side. Not particularly drought tolerant, but they're not that fussy. This is a plant called Liriope. That's what I call it. Other people call it Liriope. This is a beautiful form with a variegated yellowish foliage, and you notice the little purple flower. This is common on all forms of Liriope. This is another called Silver Dragon, also flowering, narrower leaf and a light amount of variegation. And if you're familiar with an old standby called Mondo grass, that's also in the same family group as these. But these are very nice effect, and they do spread moderately. They're not invasive. Just keep the soil cultivated around them, and a few plants will fill in a bed in a little bit of time. So we just looked at that big fat Phormium with the dark purple leaves. These are a few others that work in much smaller places. One of them is Tom Thumb, the other one is Jester. They don't get as big. They're very comfortable in pots for years. And then there's another very similar to them. You wouldn't know they were different plants, but they're not at all related. These are Cordylines, and they're related to your Dracaena houseplants, also in multiple colors and very happy in a small pot or a small garden bed for a long period of time. So give these a try. Another favorite California native where you've really got some space. This is Muhlenbergia rigens, or deer grass. It doesn't necessarily attract deer. I'm not sure why it has that name. Its finest feature is these wonderfully straight, stiff flowers that start coming on toward the end of summer. But eventually this plant will get, about chest high and benefits from being cut completely to the ground. A little extra water is fine, but they'll get by with summer dry. They'll just show their dryness a little bit. But Muhlenbergia is a great plant and really great habitat. Good insects like to nest inside, and birds are attracted to it. So consider putting this out on a nice big slope outside of fire areas. So that's it for this episode from the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden. We invite you to come up and spend a few leisurely hours and learn a few things, pick up a few plants. And thanks for staying with us. It shows that you're part of creating positive change in our community. I'm your host, Billy Goodnick. Stay water-wise, Santa Barbara County.